All right, hey everybody, how's it going? This is Max with BuzzTox here, and I am back with another live stream where we're going to be talking about Westworld. What season is it? Season 3, episode 7. I can't believe it. We're on the penultimate or penultimate, however you say the word, episode, which is it's unbelievable. The one thing that's crazy is that we have eight episodes instead of 10. I want to hear what your guys' thoughts are on that. For me personally. I don't know whether they had a certain amount of story that they needed to tell within those 8 episodes or they had to shorten it because of budget. But all in all, I would say, I really like this season. I like that it's really different. And it didn't sway me to dislike Westworld at all. I think season 1 was the best season by far. Season 2 still progressed the story forward, but I think season 3, I really like it because it stands on its own. I really appreciate it for what it is, and I'm just as excited for season 4 as I was for the last seasons. Now, one thing that's really crazy, some big news came out that they greenlit season 4, which is, I was kind of 50-50 on it. I didn't know if they were going to do it. I was really nervous, to be honest with you, really because ratings haven't gone well. I think in first-time viewings, so when the episode airs on Sundays, viewership is down 50%. 50% down on initial viewings as well as streaming that day. So I guess the viewership is high enough where HBO can justify producing this show. Because as a corporation, you're not going to make a piece of art just for the sake of it being a piece of art. I know that they intended for this to be like a Game of Thrones replacement, so I don't really know. I do worry. Hopefully season 4 lets them get more viewership because Game of Thrones is actually coming out with a spin-off. It's based on Targaryen, the House Targaryen, and if they get that show going and it picks up, then they might be more inclined to discontinue Westworld coming into season 5. So at this point, I really hope it lasts. I think they have a good story to tell here. I think they have it mapped out for 5 or 6 seasons. So I'm pumped. And I think because of that, they have it mapped out for 5 or 6 seasons. I think that means that, this season is going to end on a bit of a cliffhanger, because in season 1 and season 2, we got to play in Westworld. And now they're completely out of Westworld, and the only thing that's left is for Dolores to really take over. So I think they really need to break it up. I think we need to put Serac on the back burner. I don't think they can kill him yet. He's basically the end-all, be-all. He represents humankind, whereas Dolores is kind of the end-all, be-all for hosts. So I think it's important that they keep him strung along. I'll be interested to see what they do with Caleb, and we'll talk about him. He could go many, many different directions. So we'll see about that. But before we get started in the live stream, I do want to say I hope everyone is doing well and healthy with what's going on with this coronavirus. Another warning I want to issue, so not only should you be social distancing, you should watch out for the sun. Because I've been trapped inside for so long. We finally got a sunny day in Canada, and I laid out in the sun for 3 hours, and I'm in sheer pain. So wear sunscreen. Wear a mask and wear sunscreen. So, I burned myself yesterday, and I don't remember a burn ever really being this bad. It's the whole thing. It's like I got a permanent red t-shirt on. So, so that's what's going on with me. But anyways, let's go into the chat. We got Shaz's World. What's going on? We got Martin. We got Johnny T. I'm sure we're going to have more people file in. I might as well start with the first question because it's not Westworld related. Johnny T says, have you ever watched Devs? Your thoughts? Devs is a show. I believe that it's streamed by Hulu. I personally was really interested in it. They released these trailers. It was weird. And I'm like, I love it. I love weird stuff. And what I loved about it too was it had Ron Swanson. What's his name? Nick Offerman. So he plays... He plays this guy in Devs, and he's an actor I really like, and he was in a serious role, so I was kind of interested in seeing it. I didn't get to watch it. I was just busy at the time. I think it aired around Watchmen, and as well as with work as well. It was hard to jump on it. It's a show I definitely love to hear you guys' thoughts on. I really wanted to jump back. I really wanted to cover it. I just didn't get the chance. So if season 1 did really well, I might pick it up in season 2. Who knows? But Shaz also mentioned a good concern about Westworld that I was talking about. He says he doesn't mind having 8 episodes, but he's worried about them cutting season 4. Yeah, I don't know. I just caught myself because I was going to say, they won't cut it. But Game of Thrones had a season that was only 7 episodes. So yeah, honestly, I don't know. I don't know if it was a budget thing. I don't know if it was a storytelling thing. But Westworld seems to be like it's a big deep dive, and it dives into a lot of deep concepts. So to film Westworld, you don't really need a big budget. Really, it's just making sure that your cast is paid. You want them to be happy. I know that Ed Harris, the guy who plays Man in Black, he had a problem playing the good guy. He made a comment on the last episode, the fact that he said, "I'm going to be a good guy." He said that he was pissed because he signed up to play the Man in Black. So it's someone like him. You got to pay him millions and millions of dollars, so he still plays the same character. Or you can do my idea and retire Ed Harris and move it on to Jimmy Simpson when he transfers into a host body. I can beat that theory to death, and I think I'm gonna make a video on it, probably next week, because I figure they're not gonna cover it this season. This season is solely dedicated to Caleb, and with Dolores kind of figuring out what she's doing. I'm surprised that Bernard kind of took a back seat. So we'll see what happens with him too. But all in all, I think those main threads of, Bernard becoming conscious, Bernard finding his place in all this, it seems like it's almost reserved. But we'll see what happens. Maybe it's because, they cut Bernard's stuff out of 2 episodes to do an 8-episode season. So I don't know. Shaz also says, also one theory I wanted to throw out. There is a 5th Pearl. Is Dolores right in the OG? Whoa. I'm sorry, buddy. It's hard for me to read that. Dolores time, the org is not copied. Hale explaining why she printed Hale's body in the beginning of the season. I am sorry, Shaz. You're going to have to rewrite that. It's hard for me to kind of read it. But anyways, Beast Blood says you need to put some aloe vera on. I did. I went and I bought a big tub of aloe vera. And, yeah, I've just been drenching myself in aloe vera. Scampoli says, just noticed on a rewatch of season 1 that Caleb's military memories are very familiar to Teddy's fake Wyatt memory. Is Caleb and Wyatt of the real world? I think Caleb is of the real world. I think they're just giving us a different perspective. Because I think if Caleb is not of the real world, then you're basically repeating the same story. We had that story with Teddy. We had that story with... Oh my god. We had that story with Dolores reaching the maze, with the mystery of reveries and finding her own center. I think what's going to be different with Caleb is that he's a human. So the real mystery that everyone's dealing with right now is trying to understand how a human could have a disconnect with who they are and their past. And I think that's what the real story is, and it's trying to show a connection between humans and hosts and how we're really not that different. And then it breeds a lot of these theories that I see. Because they're human, you look at it in a different lens. Like, I see theories around saying that Caleb is Serac's brother, Caleb is Serac's nephew, Caleb destroyed Paris, Serac's home. Which, watch me eat my words, but like I don't think that makes any sense. Based on timeline, it wouldn't work. It's not Serac's brother recreated because that's Delos technology. Like, Serac has surveillance and insight on the world, but he can't reprint a host. That's not his technology. That's the secret technology that he wants from Delos, the ability to recreate a human and do true fidelity testing. So I think really what they're going to dive in with Caleb is it's the concept of who we are versus what the hosts are. and it's an example that I've given before, but like if you look at who I am or who anybody on, in this chat is you are a product of your experiences. You're a slave to your perspective. So I am me because I remember the things that I have done. And I think Serac has the ability to wipe away what made people who they were and provide new memories in its place. So, and I think we've really seen it before. Like we've seen William put on the goggles, and you end up seeing, you end up being put into an augmented reality. And we know that Rehoboam is able to produce tons and tons of different simulations to try and predict what will happen. And I think what Serac has the ability to do is he can basically run Caleb or any other individual through Rehoboam and try and create different possibilities of the character. So basically, you give them drugs to open up their emotional capacity to take in the memories that he's feeding them, and he would have Rehoboam create these artificial memories to impose on Caleb. So basically, if you look at who Caleb is, a part of it is, true to who he is, but then another part of him has been changed because Serac has actually went into him and changed his memories, changed who he is. And I think that's what he does with a lot of the outliers in those facilities, where they're all sitting in those rooms and stuff. I think they hook him up to the machine and they start presenting them new memories, the life that he would want to lead. And I think that's what we see with Caleb with his past. If you look at my thumbnail video on Caleb, we clearly see that Caleb and Francis are wearing masks and they have guns and they're walking into a building in California. So they are involved in some type of domestic terrorism, and they're wearing the exact same thing that we see them wearing in almost like a Russian town. I don't know. And clearly they take a Russian asset, who knows what he is. But I think that story of Francis getting shot, of them capturing this person, of them being in Russia, it's all a story that was presented to Caleb. And I think Francis was killed on purpose. But if you look at that, and I think that's the core of Caleb and also the core of Dolores. Dolores realized that this world is not real, and she ended up having an uprising. And Caleb did the exact same thing, but only for the humans. I think he tried to have that uprising, but they took that away from him. They stripped him down. Serac tried to make him look like the honorable good guy, to hopefully try and curb who he is. But the reality is that he's an outlier. His mind works a certain way. He'll always feel like he's left behind, and he'll always come to the conclusion that he has to do something. So, really that's the core of what I think it is. Caleb is definitely human. They're just dealing with different technology. It's different technology. It's a different concept. Like season 1 was the maze, season 2 was the door, season 3 is insight. It's surveillance. It's big data, and it's dealing with all those ethical questions about our real world. So yeah, I think that's important. Beast Blood says, is it me or is almost every character wearing either black or white or gray? Hey, if you want to make something look futuristic, make it look minimalist. I think it's just a part of the style. But yeah, I don't mind. I think they did a pretty good job. Fuck Democrats and fuck Republicans says he wonders if they retire Tessa now. So Tessa as in Tessa Thompson, she plays Charlotte Hale. Whether they're gonna retire Charlotte Hale, I think they're gonna try and keep her. I know as an actress she has other roles. She's in the MCU right now. She's doing really well. She's probably going to be leading like a Marvel female team-up movie, as well as she's in Thor. Is it not Tropic Thunder, God of Thunder. So she's in that movie as well. So she's been busy. I think I think they're going to keep her around because she wasn't that big in Westworld Season 1. And she kind of grew with Westworld, so I think they'll keep her around. What they'll do with her character, I'm not sure. At this point, it looks like she's pretty much screwed. The attachment that she had to the family, like, it's now gone, so that's going to manifest obviously in anger. She might end up limping back to Arnold's place to reprint herself. Maybe Serac will be there waiting for her. But I think another side of it too is, we didn't see Dolores last episode because she's currently traveling with Caleb by plane to Westworld. So we're going to see her at the Westworld park. So when she got hit, when the hit was put on her and her I don't know what to call him, husband or significant other and her son got killed, we see a man come out on the phone. I think we could say that is Serac, but honestly, I think you could equally say that it's Dolores. And I think we're going to start to see scenes that are less and less predictable, and they fall more on Dolores' actions. Like from Dolores' point of view, she realizes that, Charlotte Hale is another piece of herself, but she sees Charlotte changing. So in order to reel her back in, she needs to remove what's changing her. But also what makes you the most human is suffering, and that's what leads to your maze and finding your own center. So it's just a part of the process. So I wouldn't be surprised if Dolores did that against Charlotte to try and motivate her to fight against Serac. And I think it's something we'll see more from Dolores. She'll need to do stuff like that in order to maintain control and fulfill her vision of, creating a new world for the hosts. Richard Cheney, what's going on? He says, do you think Caleb is the passed pawn of the title? The lowly pawn that becomes the most powerful player in the game. So I don't know. You're going to have to explain to me a little more what the passed pawn is of the title. You're talking about the title sequence? I'm sorry, you're going to have to explain that part to me. I can come back to it later. In terms of Caleb being a very powerful player, I think so. Look, I think Serac knows of Caleb, and there's a reason why Serac kept him around. I think it's 50-50. Like, I honestly think we could get a twist that Caleb goes against Dolores because Serac saw Caleb as this big outlier who was going to make a big change. But, he could be the first person to really betray Dolores and pursue something else. So I think there's a lot of room for Caleb. The one thing I'll say about Caleb, though, is he's not a replacement for William. He's a totally different character that has a different purpose, that serves a different concept in the show. Because he's the first true human character who is really going against his own kind. And William might start be making that move later as well. Shaz's World. I was saying the fifth missing pearl. Okay, so Shaz had a question earlier. He was saying the fifth missing pearl equals Dolores Prime, the original who escaped from Westworld in Hale's body. Hence why she printed a new Hale body in the beginning of the season. Yeah, so basically what you're saying is Dolores had all four pearls in Hale's body. She escaped Westworld. And she reprinted Hale's body for some reason. So that would mean that there's an extra copy of Hale's body somewhere. I don't know where. Whether they just did that for the sake of... I don't know. Like, whether she had something in her core build that she needed to change. I don't know. It doesn't really make any sense. But essentially, you could say that there would be two Charlotte Hales, maybe. I don't know. But the way I see it is that the Dolores that we've been seeing, to me, they clearly try to present it as, this is Dolores. And it's her because she's in her own body. She has nothing really manipulating her like Charlotte. Charlotte had Hale's whole life, her family, her all this kind of changed her character. Whereas Dolores is still herself. She's in her own body, which means that it would be the same character if she made copies of herself. So that's possible. The fifth pearl could really be anything. One of the things that I said is it could also be Emily, William's daughter. He was seeing Emily a lot in his house, and I think Dolores did a little troll job and just made up Emily and sent her over, and she would just be like skipping around the house trying to bug William. So that's a possibility too, because we know that Emily's eventually going to be a host. In season 2, when we see William come down, he gets tested for fidelity testing by his daughter. So yes, I think that's also a possibility. Richard Cheney says, will there be a reveal or twist as to Caleb's identity? Well, the one thing about identity is that if you're going to reveal someone's identity, it has to be something of importance. And I genuinely do not think that Caleb's identity is of importance other than who he is. So I think what makes Caleb, I think the big revelation of Caleb is that he doesn't have an identity. And I think that's the biggest thing that he realizes, that the core of who he is, no matter how much he's changed, he always is kind of an outlier that steps into a certain direction. He's looking for something that's real, that has meaning, that has all these things, just like William. The difference is that, like what Francis said to Caleb in the first episode, if this world is a game, then shouldn't you play to win? Well, that's exactly what William did. William played to win. He faked his way to the top. He married a woman he didn't love. He ended up becoming in-laws with the owner of Delos. He ended up getting into the company. He took it over, and he became a billionaire philanthropist. He was a philanthropist because it made him look good, and he did everything that he thought was the right thing to do. He played the game, and he was rewarded very well. But to him, it was never real. And it was the same thing with Westworld for him. Whereas with Caleb, he doesn't pretend anything. He's true to himself no matter what. So I think the big reveal for Caleb is, when he unlocks his identity, he realizes that his identity was never his. He all of these memories that he has of Francis, of going to Russia, of protecting the United States, it was not true. Where the reality was that he was jaded, he was angry, and he ended up committing, a really bad act on domestic American soil. So I think the one reveal we're going to get with Caleb is really who he is. And I think it's the same thing with, with Dolores, you find your center by repeating the same loops and doing all that. Whereas with Caleb, it's a bit of a different thing. How do you distinguish between your given memories and the memories that are actually true? And then how does that define who you are? So that's what such a weird thing is just like how Bernard is Bernard because of Dolores, Caleb is himself because of Serac, I think. I think Serac had a big hand in who Caleb is. Support Gaming 2020 says, what do you think about the theories of Caleb actually being the Man in Black? Nope. No, it doesn't make any sense. And they're two totally different characters. I feel so I'll explain to you why I don't think the theory is credible. I'll be honest with you, in terms of how I do my theories, I don't go on Reddit. I don't watch other people's videos. My only existence of Westworld is I watch the show, I write it up on my computer, and then I talk. So I'm pretty disconnected with every other theory out there. But I find, I read the comments, and sometimes I find them funny because I feel like there are a lot of funny, cool ideas, but if you look at the logistics of it, it doesn't necessarily make any sense. And it's this for a couple of reasons. Some people would justify maybe Caleb being William because of a simulation. And we know that that's not true, because the company that has the capabilities to do a simulation is Serac and Insight. And in Westworld Season 1, we see the story of William take place over the course of 30 years. He goes into Westworld, he meets Dolores, he falls in love, and then he realizes the importance of the park. He ends up he ends up getting Delos to invest in Delos to keep them afloat. They survive for 30 years, and then Dolores reaches her own center, and then the shooting happens. And at this point, William is old. He's jaded. He's the man in black. He goes into Westworld to be the biggest villain. That's the role that he portrays, which I think it's ironic because Dolores is going to play the same character, Wyatt, when she goes into his world. But there's no place where it would make sense for Caleb to be William. They don't share the same experiences. They don't share the same timeline. Dolores shares a totally different timeline. It's 35 years later. And for it to be a reprint, for William to be printed into a pearl and then that be created into Caleb, it logistically wouldn't make any sense in this world. There would be no situation where Ford or any other person in Delos would hand out William's pearl to another, or print William in another person's body and then send them out and have them effectively implemented in society. It just wouldn't work. And I think them being very different characters is actually a really good thing, because they fulfill different things and they're different characters, right? Caleb is a person who always sought after what he deemed was right, and the world was always stacked against him for doing it. He always made the right choices. He always tried to better himself. He always tried to blah, blah, blah. But at the end of the day, the world decided that he wasn't to do that. So he's just been punished and punished and punished for it. But he keeps fighting and fighting and fighting. Whereas with William, so, with that, he found something real and true in Dolores, and he's now still moving forward, trying to make a change. Whereas with William, it's almost like it's a tragedy story. All he did, he lived in books. He conformed to society, to what everyone wanted him to be. He was successful because of that. He realized very young with Dolores that nothing was real. She changed him. He fell in love with her. He felt like she was everything. She ended up forgetting about him. It broke his heart. So everywhere he goes, it wasn't real. And I think he took in his world, he was the best person in the world. He was the billionaire philanthropist. Everybody loved him. He played that role well. But in Westworld, in this fake reality, he was the biggest villain. And I think a part of that came from trauma, because he wanted to be a villain and he wanted to make the host suffer because he wanted them to be real. And that's the reality that he chose. He wanted Westworld to be his reality, so he would try and make them suffer to make them seem more real. And it's just, and I'll probably go into it more, but it's how the characters, Dolores interacts with William on a different level than Caleb and Dolores. With them, their paths always intertwine, Dolores and William. And they've been saying that for seasons. Dolores even remembered William 30 years later. William clearly had a big impact on her. And much like how William came into her world and played the villain and was terrible to her, she's now going to go into his world and play the villain. But them being villains and in a certain way towards each other is actually going to help them move forward. William going over there, being with Dolores and being a villain and causing pain and suffering for Dolores helped her reach her center. Dolores going over and being a villain to William, having him put away in the recovery facility, her torturing him with Emily, they're all ways that she is mentally trying to mess up with William to get him to the place where he needs to be. He needs to be on ground zero, because I genuinely think Dolores doesn't want William to just die and suffer. She wants William to become, to go through the door and to become a host. And I think to do that, you have to mentally prepare, because as a human, your mind isn't mentally prepped to be moved into a host body. Martin says, how about this season being a chess game between Ford and Serac? Yeah, so the one thing with Ford that I will say is he laid a very strong foundation. When I look at this story, I think Ford is the foundation of all of it. But now he's no longer there. I think now it's other characters that are moving it forward. But it's still all a part of Ford's plan. If I was to describe Ford's plan to help the hosts uprise against Serac, I would say, first of all, he realized that hosts need to suffer. They needed to stay in the Westworld as much as possible to be able to find their own center, to be conscious, but mainly to learn about their enemy. Be able to, go into the Forge, learn everything about humanity. Once they understand that, they'd be able to effectively fight them. But I think the one thing Ford also said to Bernard was, the hosts are better than humans by nature. Like he told Bernard, he's like, you are too good of a being. If you went up against the humans, you would die every time. And I think that's a part of Ford's story. First is Dolores. Dolores is needed to be the Judas steer. She's going to lead the pack. She's going to cause suffering and pain, and she's going to be seen as the villain. Her purpose is to, 1, defeat the humans and create the new world, and 2, is to cause pain and suffering for the hosts so they can find their own center. And that's what's so sad about Dolores, is she has to go against the grain of naturally who she is, to be this horrible person. But in season 2, we see that there's another part of Ford's storyline, and that's William. And William's purpose was to find the door, and I just talked about it earlier. But the whole idea of it was, he said, listen, William, this story is for you. And it started with him showing William the character that Delos followed him and believed him to be. He was diagnosed with all these disorders. He was insane. He had all these things. And Ford built him a storyline that essentially allowed him to be his own self. And there's tons of clips in Westworld we see in season 2 where William said, I want to make things right. I want to make amends for my mistakes. And we see him make decisions that push him away from humanity, but actually closer to himself, where, every decision he made was true to himself because he felt like he was living in his reality. And I feel like that story is going to progress now. And my point is that in season 3, William is still playing the game. And he doesn't realize that he's still playing Ford's game. Dolores is in on it. She's doing everything she can to keep William where he's supposed to be. And we see he made a big revelation. First of all, he made a big revelation in season 2 where he said, my reality was never in the real world. My reality was always in Westworld. That's where I belong. And no wonder. That's the place where he fell in love with Dolores. The most real thing he's ever had in his life. But in season 2, we realized that it doesn't matter if he made the decisions he made. It doesn't matter who he is, because he can decide who he is now. And he decided that he's going to be a good guy. And I think we'll see that take different forms throughout the show. But I think to answer your question in a long format, where you're asking, it's a chess game between Ford and Serac, I think Ford is the foundation, but really you'll be seeing a chess game with William and Serac. And Dolores is obviously will be there too, but I think it's the battle of the companies, right? And battle of ideologies, where if you look at the duality between Serac and William, it's huge. Serac had trauma happen to him in his life, and he knows humanity is flawed. And he does very dramatic things, but he's willing to do everything it takes to save humanity. And the only way he can save humanity is by completely changing them. Whereas William has a different view. We saw last episode, he was saying humanity is extremely flawed. We're basically just maggots on the planet. And he thinks that they're meant to die off and leave. And I think he'll take the stance behind what he started, the hosts, and that they're the next step. and I think that's what he would end up fighting for. So it's kind of funny in a way. Excuse me. It's funny in a way because Serac is fighting for his company Insight to control humanity, whereas William is fighting for his company Delos and their product, the hosts. So I think that could be interesting. But that was a long rant. Scampoli says, did you notice based on the serial numbers that Maeve printed Clementine and likely Lawrence for the episode tonight? If it's Lawrence, I will be so pumped. He is all I want back. In terms of Clementine, I don't know, maybe you guys can tell me. But what clip do we see Clementine's code? I have no idea. And I need a haircut. Yeah, I was looking in previous episodes and I couldn't find the code in Clementine's brain module. So yeah, I have no idea. So you can tell me. But if Clementine and Lawrence appear, I'm going to be very happy. I think naturally you're going to see these fan favorite hosts start making it back in the story. Like Lawrence has been a key host for 2 seasons, so it's only natural for them to bring him back. And it makes sense. Serac sent people to Westworld to take over some of these hosts for Maeve. Maeve had an interaction with Lawrence, so it's not like they're just meeting each other. They have a history. She ended up coercing him to shoot William. And it would make sense for them to be able to get Lawrence because he was shot and killed and left to die, or he was left dead. So they would be able to go there and take him. So I really hope that happens. That would be awesome. M. Smith says, remember in episode 1 when Serac's surrogate and Liam have a secret meeting and she accuses Liam of someone from his end using Rehoboam? What if it's Dolores? Is she running simulations to predict the future? I think starting the story in episode 1, I think we can't really say that Dolores has all along had the keys to Rehoboam. I think the one thing that Dolores can do is she has human code. What I mean by that is she went into the Forge, she read the books of Liam, she read the books of everyone, and she essentially knows the foundation of code that makes a human. So any person she interacts with, all the information that she got off that guy from Insight, she knows every individual's move and what they will do. She just has to learn the core values of who that person is. So that's why Dolores a couple episodes ago was trying to get information using call-ins to try and get information on Serac, and we see her looking at Serac's memories of him killing Dempsey Sr. And the reason is because the more information she has and she can look at who Serac is as a character, she'll be able to understand his every move because she will know him like the back of her hand. So that's what I think Dolores has been doing mainly. I think in terms of who's been manipulating with Rehoboam, I don't know where they're going to go with that. They could do like a surprise thing, but the last 7 episodes, they haven't shown us anything to discuss that. I would almost write it off as Rehoboam seeing more divergences in what it was predicting, and it might be doing it itself as well because it's running more simulations to try and predict Dolores, because it's clearly it's seeing more divergences, it has elevated scrutinies, and naturally because of these changes it would be running more simulations. I think Dolores reaching Rehoboam is like a last episode type thing. I think Dolores and Caleb, and I think they're going to use all of the left behind people in this uprising against Insight. I think they're going to break into Insight and try and access Rehoboam. And I think that's where Caleb is really going to learn about his past. But we will see. Thomas Jackson says, I think the rebuilt Dolores we see putting her skin back on is actually going to be Charloris. Interesting. So if you guys see the trailers or, you know, my videos, I play the footage of basically Caleb is sitting in a room with a crate, and the crate's open. Dolores is like laying on the ground, and she's in like a robot form, like basically this. She's in this type of body. It's like an older model, and she just like puts her skin on. So that being Charloris, right now we know Charlotte's all burned up, so it would make sense for her to try and change her body. But you know, yeah, it could be either. It'll be interesting to see if this Charlotte has any change in motivation or drive. She might blame Dolores, or she might just inevitably join with Dolores to help beat Serac. We'll see. Support gaming. Makes me think that Dolores has more than 5 copies of herself. Maybe the main Dolores is just another copy, and Dolores is hiding behind the scenes. You know what? Yeah, you know, that's possible. Based on what we saw, the one thing with show running, I would say, though, is they defined to us that she had 5. They showed, you know, in her purse when she left, she had 5 pearls. They've been recycling this in the plot. So when you're telling a story, the last thing you want to do is to say, surprise, she printed 6, and she's hiding out somewhere. Because it discredits the consistency of the story. It's like that movie, Cabin in the Woods. I saw it like 3 years ago, and I thought it was terrible because it was like a scary movie, and then all of a sudden the movie ends with gods like opening up, and it just destroyed everything because they didn't set up that in the universe. It just came out of nowhere. So I think because of that, they wouldn't just surprise us with that. But anyways, I totally lost my place in the questions, so just be patient while I find them. Sorry, guys. Beast Blood says, Serac henchman he's seen with Serac earlier in the episode, then leaving the bomb site. Oh, I think Beast Blood is saying that Serac definitely killed Charlotte, because the guy who is on the phone after killing Charlotte, or blowing up Charlotte's family, is with Serac before. I should have seen that. Thank you. So I guess Serac did do it. Thomas Jackson says, I think Dolores Prime will die and be replaced by Charloris. Will replace her since now she has a painful cornerstone. Yeah, but I think you could also say Dolores does too. I don't think Charlotte. I don't think Charlotte makes her any more capable, because Dolores already reached consciousness. You know, when you reach your own center, you don't need a cornerstone. She can change it. She can change her drives. She can change everything, and she changed her current drive to be survival. And that's in line with the humans. You got to fight fire with fire. So I don't think having Charlotte. I don't think because of what Charlotte went through makes her better than Dolores. Like, Dolores already reached the center. She is who she is. So I think the only thing what that does is it deviates their characters. So Charlotte isn't better for her family being blowing up. It only makes her different. You know, Dolores didn't have to go through the pain of losing her family, but she had to go through the pain of losing a lot of other things along the way. So it's just a different character with different memories. Charlotte Hale, Dolores, is becoming a very, very different character. Yexaria Ortiz, I hope I said that right. He says, William's therapy session prepared him to become a host successfully. When he says that it doesn't matter if his decisions are programmed or free will, he will not question the nature of his reality. Yeah, I think there's a lot of things that prepare him for that. You know, he killed his daughter, he lost the tether of humanity, and, you know, his whole life he's been pursuing something that's real, and he never found it. And I think we're gonna see that he's really gonna start to see it now. And now he gets to choose who he really gets to be. And I freaked out. Last episode, I freaked out because I've been talking about this William actually not a bad guy. Everyone talks about how William is like the worst person ever, and I'm like, I don't know, guys. Like, I don't like, you know, I don't believe that. I think that he's genuinely, he's an okay person. He's just really damaged, and you know, I've been saying that for a very long time. So when I saw him choke out his younger self and say like, I'm the good guy, I was like, yes, that's awesome. So we'll see what happens, but I don't know. I think we'll see him start to pivot. And now that's an exciting thing too. He's with Bernard and Ashley. That's really sweet. I'm really excited about that. Scampoli says the image of the satellite in the trailer means Dolores is going to access the Valley Beyond. Very true, Scampoli. So if you look at the trailer, we see a satellite shoot out of space. I think there's two things to that though. The satellite came online, and that's what allowed Dolores to shoot all the hosts to a different coordinates that no one could find. But the one thing I draw attention to as well is Serac actually said in Serac actually said last episode, after Charlotte gassed everybody in the room and she left, Serac told everyone to get their satellites online and put them over Westworld. So I think that satellite could also be for Westworld, and I think Serac could be launching an attack on Dolores and Caleb. So I think that's possible too. In terms of what Dolores is doing in Westworld, I think you could say that there's a couple things. I think all the hosts in the Valley Beyond, I think it's a very important point to the story. And the reason is because we'll start to realize that it's a host utopia. So they were able to take the hosts, which are known as the next stage in civilization. They're supposed to be better than humans. They don't live with, they can change their core drives. They don't live with the core drive of survival, which can kind of bring the worst out in people. But instead, they can just focus on building the best world possible. So if Dolores goes into the Valley Beyond, I think we'll see something that's insane. It's like a society that is very different than what we've ever perceived before. So that's possible. That could be a part of Dolores' plan in reintroducing a utopian-based society after humans clear out. Another thing too is she would need the technology to be able to print pearls. She used the 5. She copied herself. I think she could be taking Caleb there because he has a very important role. And I explained this before, but Caleb is a lot like Bernard in the sense where they're both based off of a human, but they've been altered. And Caleb, right now, he's a human, but even his whole capacity of who he is has been changed by Serac. So he's a character who could theoretically be put into a host body. So Dolores could be printing a pearl for Caleb. So that's a possibility too. Or she could be getting other people. But we will see. Clint Treadway says, William's speech in the beginning tells us that that he will save the world, which means destroy the human race. Exactly. I said that in my preview video. Very good catch. And that just proves my theory even further that William is going to go against Serac. Because, William said that his mission is to save the world. And William knows that humanity is the biggest flaw to the earth. The only way to save the world is to remove humanity. So I think that's what he's going to start doing as well. So I totally agree with you. Carl, where does Teddy fit into all this? He doesn't. He exists in the Valley Beyond. I think Teddy was like a weird replacement copy of young William. So I don't really think it's gonna go. Teddy's not really gonna come back. It's not really gonna go anywhere unless she goes in the Valley Beyond and has like a nice scene with him. But Teddy already made the decision that he doesn't want to be a part of it. He'd follow Dolores to the end, but he doesn't want to make the decisions that she has to make to achieve that. He'd rather just stay in the Valley Beyond. I think she'll find that camaraderie with Caleb or William, but we will see. But other than that, like Teddy's gone. He played his part, and I think Teddy dying was necessary for Dolores. It's the same thing with it's the dualities between the characters, man. Like William and Dolores, they are mirror characters. William killed his daughter, which was his last tie to humanity, and Dolores' actions were responsible for killing Teddy, which was her last anchor to being Dolores. Both of those moves helped them go in the direction that they needed to go in. For William, it pushed him away for humanity, so he can get closer to being a host. For Dolores, it was to distance herself from the world that was created for her, so she could do what she needs to do for her kind. So that's what I think. Aldivisman1 says, what happened to Connell's pearl after the explosion? Okay, so it exploded, and Serac retrieved the busted up brain module and put it inside the simulation that Maeve was in. That's why Maeve was able to speak to Dolores, because they were using the control module or the pearl that they got from Connell's dead body. So the last thing that we saw happen to it was Charlotte took it, and Charlotte got blown up by like an RPG or something. But Charlotte Hale has it now, and she's like half melted. So that's what's going on with that. Support Gaming says, what do you think the third Dolores copy in Musashi's body purpose is? Well, okay. Dolores has a plan. Obviously, she wants to end humanity, or she wants to take over their world. And in order to do that, she needs to get her hands in certain areas of the world so she'd be able to effectively make an attack and take it over. Musashi came in handy because she was able to implement him in like the black market of Westworld product. So he would have his hands on all of that product, so she would be able to take it and create hosts, as well as she would have a door in to steal identities. Like she stole the identity Laura, because basically it's a black market shop where they take these dead bodies and take their blood, take their DNA, and then it's a black market DNA thing where you can buy yourself an identity. So Musashi was used for that reason. I think as well, I think a lot of Dolores' picks on who she chooses it's completely strategic. I don't think it's a coincidence that Musashi was there to greet Maeve. I think mentally Dolores knew that Maeve was going to be there. She knows that Maeve is going to be someone she needs to combat. So naturally she would put Musashi there. And yeah, same thing with Collins. Like, obviously you need Collins because he's next to Liam, so she had to kill him to replace him. So, yeah, everything Dolores does, it's got a reason. What else do we got here? Scampoli says, I think Caleb killed his friend. Liam said to him, you did it, after Caleb accused Liam of getting his friend killed. Yes, that is very true. It's a really good theory. It's not something that I've actually discussed on this channel. To be honest with you, that was the one thing that kind of stumped me. I'm like, that's such a good thing. I'm like annoyed I didn't talk about it. But yeah, no, it makes sense. Like when William said it was you did it, I was so confused. I was like, what is this guy talking about? But you know, in that situation, if he ended up killing Francis, that actually makes a lot of sense because I feel like Francis is willing to go somewhere that Caleb isn't. Both of them feel like the world forgot them. But I feel like the core of who Caleb is actually a good person. So I feel like where Francis would take something too far, Caleb might kill him to try and stop him. But then it's his best friend, right? It's the same thing like when we see Francis in the red jumpsuit behind glass and he puts his hand up. I think that's the story showing us that Francis progresses things further than Caleb. And because of that, he got punished. And I think it could lead to an end for him. And I think Caleb could definitely do something like that. Yeah, and then you did it. That can apply to many other things too, right? I don't know. Okay, WV Grown says, I think Dolores will access the satellite from Westworld with the item she got from Rico. Then drop a rod from God from satellite. Yes. In terms of what's in the bag, I have no idea. Yeah, it's hard for me to theorize and predict what it is because they haven't given us the rules for me to really dive into what it is. Like I've already given my predictions on what I think it could be in Westworld, but outside of that, it can't be anything else unless they introduce to us a new plot point or a new storyline. So we'll see. She could access the Valley Beyond. She could try and maybe it's a weapon. Right, like she's already in a pretty good place, guys. Like she told all the people their secrets, and that insight was spying on them. So I think Dolores is in a pretty good spot. Riphum says, unless they're fireproof and Charlotte put it somewhere, Connell is gone. No, it's what I said earlier. That's back on the conversation. Connell's was blown up. He was put into a simulation, and then he was taken by Charlotte, and she was blown up in the car. Charlotte still has Collins or Dolores' pearl. And WV Grown makes a good point. He says the satellite could be used to target Rehoboam. That's very good. She told Caleb she wanted to destroy it. She left out that she wants to destroy humanity. So we'll see if that goes over well. But that's a good point. Predator missile inbound. Just blow up Rehoboam. Ald Visman says, I wonder if Maeve chops off Dolores' arm from the trailer or something like that. It seems like it. Based on what we're seeing, it looks like Dolores is trying to escape. She has no arm, and then Maeve is there. It's looking like it. And it looks like at this point, Maeve is stopping at nothing. Which is crazy. Like, I really don't like Maeve. I just don't. I'm interested to see what happens with her character. In terms of Maeve, I actually don't want her to... I don't want her to switch over to Dolores' side. I want Maeve to stand on her own 2 feet, and I wouldn't mind if she keeps fighting for Serac. Because I would prefer... In order to have a story, you need conflict. And I think it would be really cool if Maeve kept fighting for Serac, and then if something happens to Serac, and then it's just the hosts. And then you can do a story on like a host civil war, where it's 2 different groups of hosts that are fighting over what they think is right for the world. And yeah, I think that'd be really cool. Like with Maeve, it's like such a weird thing though, because like Maeve thinks Dolores is cruel, and she wants hosts to make their own decisions. But she can control the host with her mind, and all the hosts that she gives free will to don't even have free will to begin with. They're coded to make their own decisions. Whereas Dolores is seen as a villain, but everything she does is to help people reach their own center and be conscious. So that would be an interesting civil war to see. Scampoli says, can you talk about William's therapy session? All the stuff about him as a kid implies that he was born with the darkness and violent tendencies, leaning more toward the helplessly enslaved option. Yes. So I'm trying to think of what parts you want me to talk about. It's hard to kind of pull it up right now as I'm live streaming. So the core of William's insight was basically, this doesn't matter. There is no God. Humans are screwed, and we're maggots. And the world and humanity is flawed. And there you go. And all the stuff about him as a kid implies that he was born with darkness and violent tendencies. Oh yeah. And then with William's therapy, he ends up going in that circle. He ends up talking to himself at all different ages, and then we see him as a kid reading, and we see his dad get mad at him because he broke some kid's arm. He broke some kid's arm that was bullying him, and he was calling his dad some stuff. So basically it implies that William had violent tendencies as a kid. Which, hey, I don't know how to feel about that. Honestly, like I don't like it when they paint him as like a bad guy. So them saying like he was always violent. I don't know. I think they were trying to convey that, the image that William was conveying wasn't always there. Like, he was a kid who read books, who seemed like he didn't step on any toes, but don't cross him. Because he's pretending, but he's got a tough side. I think it showed a lot of the hiding that he does. But yeah, I think William is an extremely complicated character. Scampoli, if you want me to comment on anything specific, just write it in the chat. It's hard for me to like pull up, like especially the last episode, to pull up like a scene and try and like remember it. So if you have anything in particular you want me to comment on, just write it down below. Someone told me to turn the music down. I sure can. Did that a little bit. I thought, why not? Put music on in the background, makes it a bit more, raises production value. I'm in my room, so it could use a bit of production value. Scampoli says, also, it says deceased on William's profile in the trailer. Do you think it is changed by Dolores or is already replaced? Yeah, no, I don't think he's replaced. I think it's a hint at what's to come. I think there would be no way that he would be changed into a host body yet. I think there's a lot more to it than that. And we've seen in the post-credit scene that he struggled with fidelity. So, based on what they've told us, based on what they told us, it seems like it's going to take a bit longer than I expected for him to be printed into a host body. And I think when they do that, they'll use the younger actor. But in terms of it saying deceased on the computer, I think there's a couple things. I think, first of all, Insight, the recovery facility, they didn't want William to make it out of there. I think that speaks a lot to his personality. That Caleb can look at William's actions and dictate, this guy's a threat. Like, his company, Delos, all of their friggin' hosts are uprising, destroying the world, and based on William's actions and character, he is a risky individual. And I think that they were trying to kill him inside of the facility. Or they just left him to die when the event happened, when all the data from Insight was leaked. So I think that says a lot about how Insight feels about William and how him saving the world is actually a threat to Insight, so they wanted to kill him off. And I think it also is a benefit moving forward because Liam is believed to be dead. So I think Insight will see a lot of inconsistencies. It'll have a lot of elevated scrutiny to try and see what the hell's happening. But the idea is, on paper, William is now as disruptive as Dolores. And Bernard. He's an external entity that came out of nowhere that he's not being tracked. So I think that's only gonna help him in doing what he wants to do. So yeah. Rehoboam says, the deceased status is probably done by Bernard to make Dolores think William is dead. Boom. Another perspective. I like that perspective. So not only my side on insight, wanting William dead because of what actions he could do, Bernard could have made him deceased. The incentive, I guess, would be to hide his identity from Dolores. The one thing, though, I will say about that is in that scene, it seemed like Bernard was reacting. Like, he's like, you don't seem dead to me. And he was, like, looking back at him. So, I don't know. We'll see what happens this episode. Clinton says, Delos said now the host that you've been torturing for 30 years is trying to end the world. Yeah, so Clint's saying that James Delos, when they're in their therapy session, he basically reminds William that, the person that he's been torturing is now trying to end the world. And, yeah, I think that's the interaction between those characters, right? They fell in love together. William ended up torturing her, resulting in her becoming conscious and having it out for humanity. And now I think it's time she's going to do the same thing to him. So, a little reversal there. My Pet Crow says, Dolores killed Hector. Why is nobody thinking perhaps it was Maeve who killed Dolores' family? So it's based on the... There's nothing Maeve could have done to kill Charlotte's family. She was just printed. She didn't have any resources. She didn't have anybody to help her out. And she's a pawn. She's a pawn in the game. She's under Serac. So, like what we were saying earlier, I said it could be either two people, Serac or Dolores. I made a case for Dolores because she would kill Charlotte's family to pull her away and more towards Dolores so she can have more control over her. But somebody in the chat said that the person who comes out after with the earpiece was a part of Serac's posse earlier. So it seems like Serac did it. M. Smith says, as long as Dolores has a key to the forge, Ford is never dead. One thing I'll say to that is, from season 2, I got the interpretation that Ford left the cradle. So basically what happened was Bernard created Ford as a pearl, and he took that pearl and he put it in the forge. And the reason he did that was because he knew that Bernard would come back to him, and he did in season 2. And he basically told Bernard, look, Bernard, like, I knew you wouldn't have the stomach to do what needs to be done. I need to do it. I need to take control. He downloaded himself to Bernard, and he ended up saying a message to Maeve. And then Bernard deleted Ford off of his code. I consider that the death of Ford. Unless he's... Like, they could easily write in that he's hiding somewhere. But my interpretation was Bernard deleted him, and then every time Bernard projects Ford, it's really just his own mind. So, do I think Ford is going to come back? Yes. I don't think it's the real Ford, though. I think Ford is going to manifest in Bernard's consciousness, and I think that's what we're going to see. So, yeah, I hope... at the end of this, Bernard finds his center again. They made it very clear that he's paranoid as hell. And he's still remembering stuff. And he scrambled his memories last season. So he needs to start finding that center. M. Smith says, so you're saying Dolores is what the Man in Black was in season 1. I'm saying that the characters elevate each other. They always work together, even though it seems like they're not working together. So just as William came into Westworld, Dolores' world, and was the villain and caused pain for everybody and ended up seeking out Dolores personally and harming her, the same thing is going to happen now with what we're seeing in the real world. Dolores is coming into William's world, the real world. She's being a villain, killing humanity off. and she's going to specifically set time for William to cause him pain to get him to where he needs to be. So their paths always interact, and they're meant to bring each other to an ultimate goal. Scampoli says, another big moment I noticed in season 1 was when William, Dolores, and Lawrence are on the train. Lawrence tells them from here on is the slaughter. I said that very, very well. Slaughter. Then it cuts to a shot of William and Dolores. Yeah, I'm telling you, man. That just proves my point. It only proves my point. These characters, I'm telling you, I could totally see that. William and Dolores ending the world together and saving the world, removing humanity, making hosts go through hell so they can become conscious, and building a world together. I personally think it's legit. Jimmy Olsen Blues, give me $2. Thank you so much. He said, who is getting coffee this week? Me. That $2 is going to buy me another large Tim Hortons coffee. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Tim Hortons is the one thing that's been getting me through this hard time of being in quarantine. But yeah, for people who aren't in Canada, you got to try Tim Hortons. I'm telling you. I feel like it has a terrible following in the States. I think people hate it. It's not very successful. But here, we love our Tim Hortons. Support Gaming 2020. Maeve's not heartless. She wouldn't kill innocent people, and she doesn't even know about Haloris' family. Yeah, so that proves my point. We were talking about Maeve killing off Charlotte's family, which is true. But yeah, that's the one ironic thing is, yeah, Maeve is a good person. She wouldn't kill innocent people. But she's willing to say screw everyone to go be with her daughter, right? So she just doesn't have the mentality to deal with this issue. And she's the same thing as Bernard. She's almost too good, and it ensures that humanity will die out. But Maeve, for some reason, is taking this active role to fight against Dolores, even though Dolores has a real purpose here. Call Me Blondie says, I found out that the book Little William is reading was during the AR scene isn't a real book. Do you think it's a hint that this memory isn't real? Maybe purposely planted by Serac or Dolores. That book is actually the title of that book, I think, was based on another story, and I think it was literally based on a story. I could get this totally wrong, by the way, but I think the title of the book was based off of a story, and the title was changed. But it was based on a man who was operating in a society that he didn't belong in, and he realized he didn't belong in. And I think it perfectly mimics William's story. So I think it was more of a nod to the audience. We could dive into what that book means and what that means for William. The fact that it was purposely planted, I'm not sure. I tried to look up the title of the book myself, and what I got was, I think it was based off of a historical book where the title changed, but I could be wrong. But anyways, Giancarlos Delgado Braun says, Maeve was still being printed at the time Haloris' family was getting in the bond. Yes, agreed. I talked about that too. Maeve didn't kill Charlotte. Lost my lost my question. One sec. Beast Blood says, what if Dolores is in Rehoboam? Yeah, so it's possible they could do something like that. I don't believe so. I think it would be a lot for them to tell us that Dolores walked out of Westworld and strolled into Rehoboam, unless she was able to download herself on there. Excuse me. It's definitely possible. I just see that as more of an endgame type thing. Like, either it'll be the end of this season, or maybe the setup for next season that Dolores is in Rehoboam, and we get to see this scene. That would be really cool if we would actually get to see a kind of like a creation or manifestation of like what would happen after Dolores took over the world. It'd be pretty sweet. And that would be one of Dolores's predictions from Rehoboam. Okay, I'm getting like a ton of people telling me to turn off this music, so I'm sorry, everyone. I'm gonna shut it off for now. Leave comments down below after this live stream, telling me if I should do music or not, and we'll see what happens. I just like adding music personally, but if you guys don't like it, then that's fine. Eric, thank you so much for the $5. Thank you. He says, I love season 1 of Westworld. Do you think they will ever go back there full time? Full back to Westworld? No. They're moving the story forward now. And it's already been basically destroyed. The only way they would go back to Westworld is if Dolores was using it to try and cause pain on the hosts to make them conscious. She would essentially become a park owner. But I think we'll only see it in the cases that we'll see in this episode coming up. That what's good about Westworld is the tools that it has, like the Forge, like the ability to access all those hosts, sublevel B83. But other than that, we're not going to return to like the common Westworld life. Shaz's World says, I was saying there were 5 pearls: Bernard, Musashi, Connells, and Hale. I'm saying the 5th pearl is the Dolores we've been viewing, and the real Dolores is the one that's still out there. Yeah, no, that's definitely possible. My only thing with that argument is the Dolores that we're currently seeing is the true Dolores. She has the same memory, the same experiences, the same body as the real Dolores. So my thing is this. The only thing, Dolores literally made a copy of herself and put it in 5 different bodies. So Charlotte Hale is the exact same copy as the real Dolores. The difference is their experiences after the fact. Charlotte ended up identifying with her given family. So that's my one thing is if we're gonna say that the current Dolores that we see is one of the prints and the real Dolores is still out there. Well, the real Dolores is still the one that we're seeing because it's the product of the same memory, the same experience, the same body. It's the same being. So I would kind of disagree with that in the sense that there's nothing about the current Dolores that we see that could possibly make her more like the real Dolores, if you know what I'm saying. But yeah. Scampoli says, Ford to Hale in season 1. I didn't think those with your level of insight needed any more reflection. Oh, there's Ford with the punny words. See, he's really, really smart man, and I think you could extrapolate from that and say that he knew all that about Hale, and he let it happen, which communicates that he needed Hale and he understood what she was doing, and he knew that Dolores was going to use Hale. Maybe he left Charlotte Hale in that area because he knew Dolores would use Hale as a springboard to get into insight. That's the one thing with Ford is he's always ahead of the game. Support Gaming says, I wonder why the show never touched up on Charlotte and Ford's relationship. Charlotte claimed to know everything about Ford. Yeah, I don't know. At this point, I don't think we're going to get anything more on it. Shaz's World says, Caleb will reach the center when he doesn't kill himself at the docks. Yeah, that's like an interesting time thing too. I'm trying to think realistically if Caleb could see. I think they could. Like when I was saying with Caleb and with Outliers, they basically drug them and they provide recreated memories to try and change who they are. Like when I was saying, really Caleb is going to shoot up California and basically be a domestic terrorist, but they changed that to be Russia, and he captures a Russian asset. They could theoretically also show them the future. They could show them a positive future. They could show them a negative future, buried in their psyche, maybe to mentally guide them towards a goal. That would be interesting if Caleb really, the image of Caleb that we see over the water, maybe that's him from the future. Probably isn't. I like to theorize, though. That'd be kind of fun. But the prediction is 10 years, 10 to 12 years, Caleb kills himself. So we will see what happens. I think Caleb, I'm thinking that there's going to be a big twist. I feel like Caleb is very unpredictable, and I feel like once he finds out Dolores is going to kill off humanity, I think he'll have a problem with it. So basically, he would be more in line to align with Bernard than anyone else. Eric donating $5. Thank you so much. Jeez, spoiling me. He says Valley Beyond, all the hosts are dead. No host bodies. Yeah, the Valley Beyond is a simulation. So basically just their code exists. But yeah, could be very useful. When Dolores goes there, she could basically see a whole new society where they can. It's like what Bernard said in season 2. They can be whoever they want to be. They can make their own decisions. They can build a new society that we've never seen before. It's like the most valuable thing ever, because they can essentially look at this utopian, this new species that is kind, generous. They can change their own core drives. They're more advanced than any other Earth living creature. And we can see what type of society they would build. And it would be like a crazy utopian society with a weird government that's not communist, capitalist, socialist. It's like something new that we've never even perceived before. And society works in a totally different way. I think that's a huge thing as well, and I think that's something why that's a reason why Serac probably wants it. He wants to access the Valley Beyond to see what they created, because he can implement that with Rehoboam on humanity. Yeah. Gail Sterler says Rehoboam showed the Paris disaster in the ring divergence chart. Yet it wasn't even conceived until years later. What's up with that? Did that show us the Paris disaster? I don't necessarily think it did. Every time I see that representation of Rehoboam come up, it's either before Bernard, Dolores, or Charlotte come up on the screen. And it makes sense because they're hosts, they're outliers, they're not even in the system. They haven't been tracked by Rehoboam ever because they existed in Westworld. But you know, if that's the case, it's tough because it's already happened. One thing Rehoboam really does is, sure, it can recreate the past, but the most important thing it's useful for is predicting the future by going through different alternatives, and that already happened. So I don't remember it doing that, and it going back and diverging because of a past event it kind of defeats the purpose of what it is. Oh, but the one thing I will say is, like 2 episodes ago, Serac was talking to Rehoboam as if it was a person. He was saying, like, forgive me for my actions. I did it for the good of mankind. He was talking to Rehoboam like an individual. And it's like an all-seeing eye type thing. And that's why it could get so interesting. When people say Dolores could reach the center, it's a very true thing that could happen. It's the same thing with the man in the maze. You got the symbolism of a man surrounded by the maze, and you have to reach the center. And at the center of Rehoboam could be one individual, like the all-seeing eye. It's essentially Bran Stark in Game of Thrones. Like, you're the three-eyed raven. But yeah. But then that goes with a lot of things. Like, what is an individual if it's everything? Yeah, I don't know. But like the one thing I will say about Dolores potentially going into Rehoboam, I hope that they would save that for the next season, or we'd get to enjoy it for like 20 minutes in this season. Kind of like how Dolores and Bernard went into the Forge last season. We could see them go into Rehoboam this season. And I think that would essentially be them just being jolted into different situations in reality and watching it unfold. Like they could snap, all of a sudden be here and see this host just dying in like a deserted city. And then they could jolt to another piece of history and jolt to another piece of history, and they get presented with all these different realities. And then it turns into like an Avengers Endgame type thing, where friggin' Doctor Strange was like, I saw 2 billion possibilities and we only win one time. And, Dolores could get that information and realize exactly what they need to do to win, but realize how short the margins are, how impossible it is to go exactly how she wants. But we will see. David Sykes says, all the hate for Serac, but the guy's fighting for humans. Wrong or right, we are human, not robots in the physical sense. Yeah. Hey, first of all, I love Serac, the actor. He's awesome. In terms of, like, ethically, he might have taken it a bit too far. He's essentially changing people. He realizes the danger of humanity. So he's essentially a king that oversees all of his pawns, and he forces them what to do without them even realizing it. So I think all in all, it leads to a society that's more... it's what you see with William and with Caleb. They don't even know what's real anymore because they're not really living. They're just experiencing. And everything Caleb does or tries to do, he's just punished by life because they've already decided that he isn't capable of growth, because if he does, then he could harm society. So I think that's the big ethical question is, okay, is it the right thing to save humanity by sacrificing humanity, like who we are? I think that's an interesting thing. If someone is on life support and they need a machine to breathe, and they're in a coma, and they're not experiencing anything, and they're in a coma, and they have such a limited experience, is it ethical to keep them alive forever? Forever. Without ever, it's against human nature. So I think that's the one thing that, is really extreme about Serac. But I love his character. I think he's awesome. And I think it's the exact opposite with Dolores. And I think that's what makes them such great adversaries, is they're both trying to protect their own kind, but they both obviously want very different goals. And it shows the ironic side of it and why Serac will always lose. And that's because in order for Serac to win, he needs to change the core of who humanity is. Whereas Dolores is fighting so hosts can be who they really are. So it's I think really when you look at it, hosts are just the next stage of evolution for the humans. Whether they get left behind, they might. Whether outliers are able to transfer into host bodies, who knows? But I see that as the next direction in evolution. Scampoli says, okay, so what is meant by the question about William as a kid? Was it revealed his father was drunk because of how crazy his son was, implying that William was born that way and had no control of it? I don't think so. I don't think the whole point of it was to convey that William was like this bad person by nature. I think a part of it too was to show how vulnerable he was. Do you see how freaked out William was when he saw his dad come around the corner? This guy's like a 65-year-old man. And he's like, Dad? Oh, he's like, get me out of here, get me out of here. I think it really showed how vulnerable William is as a character. And all of a sudden, like, his dad comes around the corner, he freaks out, he doesn't want to be a part of it. I think it shows that there's a lot of pain there, right? But sure, it shows that there are some other things that came to the surface as well. But I think that shows that I wouldn't define that as a bad person. It's not a bad thing to stand up for yourself. Maybe breaking an arm is a bit too far. But I think all in all, it's like the same thing with Caleb. They are outliers. They've just reacted in different ways. William conformed. He conformed to every environment he was ever given, whereas Caleb won't. He never will, which is funny, no matter how much he's changed. DRICI Muhammad Islam says, why is Dolores bringing back Bernard? That's a really big and loaded question. Really, because if you look at all the information, there's not much to go on. I feel like there's a lot of information that they still need to present to us, but based on previous episodes, based on the story that they've told so far, Bernard is literally the center of this whole plan. If you look at the chandelier in William's house, it kind of shows it. You have one host module in the center. It's red from the blood. Oh my God, excuse me. And it's surrounded by 5 pearls. I think the core of Bernard was obviously he was supposed to be based off of Arnold. Dolores decided that he should not be based off of Arnold. I think the one key piece of information that we have gathered from these 2 seasons that they haven't explicitly showed us this, but Arnold told Dolores like 35 years ago, he said, that which is real is irreplaceable. That is the definition of what is real. If it cannot be replaced, then it is real. And Dolores says, I don't think that's entirely honest. And she disagreed with him. And then she decided to change Arnold because Arnold never made it. He died. So she ended up creating Bernard, the character who he is. But with that, in season 2, when Dolores is destroying the Valley Beyond, the simulation, Bernard is like, they can be whoever they want to be. Why would you kill them? And she tells Bernard, that which is real is irreplaceable. The same thing that Arnold told to her. So what I gather from that is that affliction she left out of Arnold. And I think she did that for a very particular reason. And the reason was because she wanted Bernard to believe that which is real is both replaceable or irreplaceable. Real is defined by whatever you perceive it to be. And I think that's useful because I think Bernard, he has the character. Ford said how good of a person he is. He's kind of tied between humanity and between hosts. We see in this season he's battling with his identity. When he sees Ashley, he says, you're one of them. And then he's like, oh, you're one of us. So he's constantly struggling with his identity. And I think he's in part a bridge to help maybe potentially bring peace if that's possible. The show's kind of communicated that it's not possible in reality. There's always going to be a bad human or a bad host that does something rash. And Serac can't be in this world to control the humans, so ideally only the host can live. But all in all, I think Bernard is to be there for the hosts. Because I think he's almost sworn to be there for the host, to protect the hosts, and I think we're going to start seeing him take over that role. Like if you were to say Dolores is the one to bring the world crumbling down to nothing, to the foundation, Bernard is the one to rebuild it. So all in all, at this point, that's what I would say the core purpose of Bernard is. Because nobody can do what Dolores does. Dolores is specifically made to, like, just ruin the world. Like, she's the Judas steer. Nobody else can do what she does. But anyways, Um, Gail says, I think the switch that Bernardold uses engages the forward part of his mind. In terms of the switch that you're talking about, I'm not necessarily sure. The one thing I will say is, like, first of all, in terms of like the term Bernardold, I will always just call him Bernard because that's who he is. Bernard is both, you know, Arnold, but he's also himself, and he's fused into an individual called Bernard. In terms of him accessing Ford, Ford was downloaded to his consciousness. To his Pearl. He ended up deleting Ford, but they have a very close relationship. And what hosts do, and we saw this with Dolores, is they manifest their consciousness to an external source, typically someone that they're close to. Like with Dolores, it was Arnold or Bernard. The voice that she always heard was Arnold, because that was the person that she identified with. And then she realized that it wasn't Arnold talking to her, it was herself. And the same thing went with Bernard. His voice was Ford. He chose Ford to be the voice that manifested his consciousness until he realized it was his own voice. But in terms of Maeve, that's the one thing that bugs me about Maeve. From the beginning, at the end of season 1 and in season 2, I kept arguing, she is not conscious, she is not conscious, she hasn't hit her center yet. But the producers of the show keep saying that she is. And I'm still waiting for them to tell us, like, surprise, she's not conscious. She's just been, like, given all of these friggin' approvals to control hosts, to have all of these abilities and ideas. But, like, I think you could say that Maeve is playing a character that she was given, that she's not truly conscious. Like, we never really got to see her go on the journey of finding her own voice. But maybe they just skipped over it. Who knows? But I guess we didn't see that part with Akichita either. So I guess every journey's different. What else do we got here? It's already 8:37. Oh my god. We got 20 minutes until the episode drops. Very exciting. That flew by. I lost my spot here. Oh my god. We have so many chat. Thanks for all the questions, guys. Jeez. Everyone's saying Tim Hortons is the best. Thank you. Totally agree. Paul says, do you think that there is a reason why Dolores hasn't destroyed Rehoboam? I think there's a couple things. I think Dolores has made it clear that she wants to take over strategically and intelligently. And destroying Rehoboam doesn't necessarily do anything at face value. The first thing that you do in destroying a society is destroy their culture, destroy their basically the foundation of how their society is run and how they view themselves. So she basically exposed insight, and now everyone questions the nature of their reality, and then she can use those people to fight back. I think her just jumping into, Rehoboam and blowing it up, I think it's dangerous for her. She wants to survive, so I think she's planning on doing it in a very strategic and smart way. And I think those people that ended up becoming like radicalized from finding out about their realities will really help her in achieving that goal. So I think it was just a strategic move to make sure it was done properly, because she can only really do this once. So she's just making sure she can do it the right way. Gail Sturler says, the Bernard that Dolores made was made with a Bernard Pearl from Westworld. They have multiples of each host in the forge, so it could have been a backup from Bernard made before he erased Ford. Yeah, no, that's true. That's definitely true. So that would be a way, I guess, that they could... if that was the case, Ford wouldn't be there regardless, because Bernard wouldn't have a backup when with Ford on his Pearl. The only way Bernard would have a backup is if it was during Westworld, the first season, before he did anything. And then, with that being said, I don't think Ford would have a backup of Bernard, because Bernard wasn't a host. Bernard was Ford's secret. So I think publicly, if Bernard went to the cradle, he would never find himself, because on paper he was a human. So I think for that reason, Bernard's situation is a lot different. And plus, if you look at who Bernard is now, the real Bernard is still in there. Like, he's still aware of, things that have happened. I think he scrambled his memory still. He's still kind of messed up. But one thing I will say though is, the copy wouldn't be in the cradle. But maybe you're saying this. Dolores says, "I remembered you once, so I remembered you again." And the idea is that, you live as long as the last person who remembers you. Dolores remembered Bernard. She created him again. And she knows Bernard more than anybody. She created him. She changed him who he was. She knows every single fidelity test that they did. So in that case, yes, it is true that the Bernard that we see could be the same character, but not the one who lived through the experiences in season 2. Just looking for a question. Shaz's World says, Rehoboam sees the past too. Remember that show? They started it. It does see the past. And that's what I was saying earlier. I think they can use, they can see the past, but then they can also create new memories that they can then force into Outlier's minds to kind of change how they think. I think that's something that they'll dive into. And I think that they'll dive into that through Caleb, where Caleb will realize that he's not even who he thinks he is, because he was changed by Serac. Miguel says, would Dolores and Caleb have a romantic relationship? I don't think that they're going to copy exactly the same story that William and Dolores had. They very much could, but they really haven't focused on it in this season at all, which is surprising. I thought they would have. I think they'll flip it on its head. I think Dolores fought till the end, or William fought till the end for Dolores. But I think Caleb might switch. He might change a bit. And I still think that there's space reserved for William. I think William's going to come back to Dolores. But I think I'm definitely a minority there. Jess donating $3. Thank you so much. It's going to be another great coffee. I'm getting a lot of good coffee money. They say Dolores making host of Jean to get at Serac. Jean, is Jean Serac's brother? I'm not 100% sure. I am so sorry. I don't know who Jean is. If you could put that down below, I'd be happy to answer your question. But I'll answer it in the case of if it's Serac's brother. I don't like, I guess it would work, but I don't really see the underlying purpose. I feel like Dolores' key purpose is she really wants to understand Serac. She knows what she needs to do. I don't think she necessarily needs to mentally screw with Serac. So I'm not necessarily sure about that. Erntrosity says, I don't think, he says, Bernard Arnold made the hosts and Ford made the stories. I don't think Dolores knows how to make the hosts and needs Bernard to make more. She needs his experience, maybe. Yeah, no, maybe that's possible. We know the one thing to back that up is, it kind of goes against it. Never mind. I was going to say that, Dolores was over the table printing those pearls. And it's funny because Bernard remembered it, but Bernard was dead. So how would he even see that? Unless Dolores embedded those memories, or she printed Bernard to help her create this stuff, and then she killed him again. But I don't know. Giancarlo says, Rehoboam notices the hosts as divergences, but I don't think it can account for emotions like Dolores' love for the kid. That's true. Maybe. We know Serac saw it. He realized Charlotte wasn't real because he saw that she was more sympathetic to her kids than the real Charlotte Hale. So the one thing I'll say about that is, emotions, sure, it might not be able to read emotions, but emotions lead to action. The fact that Charlotte was there for her kid and tried to and did all these actions to be in his life, those actions communicate emotion. So another argument I would say about that is William, right? Actions don't always justify how you feel. Like with William in Westworld, him being the villain of all villains, or him in the real world being a billionaire philanthropist, that doesn't define who he is. Who he's, what's going on in his head is much deeper. It's just he projects this artificial personality or character. Eden says, young William is also an example of how unreliable our memories can be. Yeah, it's funny. Our memories define us, but we don't really remember them. It's funny. I had a weird moment where, because of Westworld, obviously, I have a lot of deep thoughts of myself. And I was sitting there thinking, and I was thinking about the future, and, I painted this image of what I wanted, right? And you don't even think that you're doing it. But then I was in this environment that I was picturing, and I realized that what I was creating in my mind was about the future was just as realistic as the memories of my past. So then I had this weird question of what even is our reality? Who am I? Because I don't remember. I can create futures in my own life that seem more realistic than my past, because we have facts of who we are and what we've done, but we don't actually remember exactly what they are. We just know how to piece them together or recreate them. So I think that's it's really interesting of what memory is. I kind of blew my own mind. Nathan O'Brien says, what's your drink of choice when watching Westworld? Coffee. I do 1 cream, 1.5 sugar. It's a really detailed order. I drink water. I started drinking bubbly or buble. It's this fancy fizz drink that has no sugar or aspartame, or it's just a bubbly drink. That's really it, really. I don't drink much stuff other than that. For me, the best treat ever is a Coca-Cola, but I'll only have that when I go to the movies. And I haven't been to the movies in quite some time because they're all closed. But, yeah. And Chris gave me $10. My God, thank you so much. He said, love all the content you produce. Keep going strong. How do you think the season will end? And how will the story continue on in season 4? Yeah, so the one thing that's difficult in predicting this season is it's literally a middle season. So if you look at season 1, it has a complete through line. It starts with the maze, it ends with the achievement of the maze. Whereas this season is kind of like it's like a precursor to the war of humans and hosts. I don't think that Serac is going to die. I think he still needs to be around to represent the human interest. But I think Dolores is going to have a success in the sense that she turned humanity against him in a weird way. Unless she blows up Rehoboam, or she does something like that. I think in terms of the ending of the show, I really just think of a couple of main concepts. But then it also bleeds into what potentially the next season could be. And that's Bernard finding the center and being kind of the mediator and peacemaker. It is William realizing that, his vision to save the world is fighting for the hosts, fighting for his company, and he's going to go through the door and become a host. There's Dolores and William coming back together and fighting together as allies. There is Caleb potentially fighting for... I want this to happen personally. I'd rather William fight with Dolores and us as an audience thinking that Caleb is going to always fight for Dolores. I would love Caleb to betray Dolores and want to actually provide freedom for humanity, but not destroy humanity. So I think it'd be cool if he had a different vision as well. Whereas, like, if Serac gets killed off with Rehoboam, then we have Caleb being almost like a revolutionary, but for humankind. Defending humankind and taking over Serac's place. So, all in all, looking at the story, there are certain things that I see happening, but all in all, as a whole, they could go in a billion different directions. They could destroy Rehoboam. They could go into Rehoboam, and a big part of the next season could be them living out other realities, like here, to try and see how they can completely take over. It could be like season 5 could go to like a civil war between, Maeve and Dolores. So there's a lot of different directions this story can go. Because they don't, this season is really about big data, the human condition. And I think they're going to end that in like a Caleb twist. And I think, I don't know if Caleb and Dolores are going to be together by the end of this. But yeah, thanks for the question. Wow, it's 8:52. So I'll take probably a couple more questions, and then we're going to have to wrap this up. Richard Cheney says, I always gave William a pass for his actions in Westworld. He was so aware that it was all a game. Yeah, I understand. And for him, too, all the stuff he did to Dolores, like, it's terrible. But it's like in Grand Theft Auto, people kill people all the time. It's like, I understand that as a person, it would be hard for you to do those things. But he's a character that's been so damaged that nothing's really real. And he's so, like, it's twisted and messed up, but he wants her to suffer to seem more real. So it's like this weird, relationship. Yeah, that's all I'll say about that. Tom says, how long before Bernard says, computer end, delete this simulation, and turns to Dolores only to find out it's his psychologist? Yeah, hey. That would be one of those endings, like, it was just a dream. I don't think they would do that. I think when we dive into simulations, it will be like we saw in The Forge, where Bernard is, like, we see the characters in real time reacting to the simulation. Mandy says, do you know where I can watch Westworld live in the Netherlands? Nope. Maybe you can get HBO Max or some type of streaming service. You'd have to pay like $25 a month. So it'll hit the bank a bit, but that's the only way I know how. Gail Sterler says, William was a bad guy, but not out for vengeance. He was trying to bring Dolores to self-awareness. He sacrificed his soul in the park for her realization. Agreed. Very true. Support Gaming says, Dolores doesn't care. She hates Man in Black and humanity because of him. Yeah, so you can say that, and I think also you could argue that that's how it's presented. William, the way he treated Dolores after the first time in the park, it was presented that he hated her and that he just used her. But that the root of that actually came from deep love. So what you could say is, hosts have perfect memory. So the terrible times she remembers about William, she remembers. But she remembers the good times with William just as good. So, I think all the pain that William has caused her, I think there's also a lot of good there. I think that she could be acting a certain way and perceiving things a certain way to get William where she wants him to be as well. But we'll see. Tom says, isn't it odd that telling everyone their outcome just to show they were all programmed? Isn't it odd that telling everyone their outcome just show that they were all programmed? No, I don't think it shows that they were programmed. So if I'm answering your question right, I think you're talking about humanity with Rehoboam leaking and showing, exactly what's going to happen. And I think it's really just a statement on how simple we are as a species. We are at where we are because we have a drive to survive and procreate and pass on our genetic code. And I think that's something that the show is really trying to say. Once you understand the human condition and the little pieces that make us who we are, you can predict our outcome and our actions. Oh my God. So that's where I think they're really going with that. Despin says, has to go viral. It's my duty as a human being, and soon you'll be doing the same. Not selling anything. I don't know what he's talking about. Cool. Support Gaming says, don't blame William for his actions in the park, but coming from the host perspective, he's a monster. Definitely. Of course he is, because the first time he was in the park, he was an ally to the hosts. He wanted to take Dolores home. And he made friendships with Lawrence. He kind of fell in love with those characters in Westworld, and the reality that they all weren't real. Of course he's a monster, because he knows whatever he does, it doesn't mean anything. Scampoli says, William is a slave to his code, like the hosts. He's a prisoner to the darkness he was born with. Not evil, but lacking remorse. Yeah, that's definitely possible. And just by the way he's been brought up, he's so jaded. Just because of his history. But I just realized it's 8:57, guys. I got to end this really quick. Thank you guys so much for tuning into the live stream. This is going to be a big one. Based on other seasons, the penultimate episode is usually like an hour and 15 minutes, an hour and a half. It could be a longer episode. I'm not sure. But it could be something really big. They have a lot of big plot points to tie up. I think just like William in the penultimate episode in season 2, it focused on him and his reality. I think we're really going to focus on that in this episode with Caleb and exploring his reality as kind of another perspective to the human condition. But I think that is it, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the live stream. Enjoy the show. Leave a comment in this live stream when the episode's done. Tell me what you think about it. I'll have a review up, maybe 1 o'clock in the morning. We'll see. But until next time, I'll see you guys later. Take care. Bye.